Chapter 8 Bayard Shenanigans. After a month and a half of not hanging out with anyone my age, I was excited to meet up with some friends in Bayard, Texas. Gabe and Katie drove from my hometown, Wichita, to visit Kristen in Arlington. I was only a 2-hour drive away, so we planned to meet up for the evening. The day was challenging, having set a new personal record of 37 miles. I felt a huge sense of accomplishment as I rolled up to my motel around 8 o'clock. Not long after arriving, my friend showed up. We stayed up way too late in regard to the schedule that I had been on, but it was so worth it. The first thing we decided to do was go pick some prickly pears. I'd been pretty curious about these after having picked one up a few days prior, not aware of the small thorns they were covered in. A pain to pull out for sure. The day afterwards, I pulled up a YouTube video on how to correctly pick and eat them. After some more research, I read that they are supposed to taste like a mix between bubblegum and watermelon. Bubblegum and watermelon? I love both of those, so I had to try it for myself. Now with my friends, we drove to a nearby travel stop to pick up a lighter for burning the thorns. On the way there, we got pulled over for allegedly rolling a stop sign. It was quite the long ordeal, but after my friend mentioned that I was walking across the country, the mood seemed to lighten a little. She ended up only getting a warning and advice on where not to go looking for prickly pears to avoid rattlesnakes. We continued on our way to get a lighter and then drove down the highway I had walked on earlier in the day, knowing I had passed many prickly pears. After trying to burn the tiny thorns off, we filled an empty Whataburger cup with several of them, then drove back to my motel room. Upon cutting them open, we discovered that they don't really taste anything like bubblegum or watermelon. One small bite and I was done. There was a lot of build-up to that moment. I had been thinking about prickly pears for days, so it's safe to say I was a little disappointed. Maybe we just didn't know which ones to pick and ended up with some that weren't at their prime ripeness. Who knows? My Dairy Queen leftovers, along with some candy from the travel station, more than made up for the prickly pear letdown. I got my guitar that I had asked my friends to bring out of their car and played some tunes. I've always loved playing music. Growing up, I took several years of piano lessons, and while I don't consider myself to be exceptionally skilled, I enjoy playing to this day. Bringing a piano wasn't in the realm of realistic possibilities, so the guitar had to do. We sat around, singing and snapping Polaroids. For once in several weeks, I felt like a normal college kid, just hanging out with friends and having a good time. Not spending time worrying about what was going to happen in the coming days, if I had enough supplies, or what I would do if a certain scenario came up. These thoughts would often consume me. It's easy to say that it's pointless to waste time worrying about things. It's a whole other challenge to actually follow through with that mentality. It was most definitely worth staying up that late to make more time with my friends, but the marathon walk the next morning did not feel great. At this point, the spacing between towns was getting further and further apart. I had already been upping my miles, but was starting to find my limit. Abilene to Sweetwater, Texas was a total of 39 miles. I was exhausted. Not only was this the highest number of miles I had walked in a day, but it also totaled up to my first time walking over 100 miles in the span of 3 days. As much as I was pushing my body, I'm glad I did. Like I said, towns were starting to spread further apart, and the distance was only going to continue to increase. After taking a day off in Colorado City, then spending the next night in Big Spring, Texas, I began working my way through the oil fields of Texas. I'd been nervous about this area, and rightfully so. All the stealth camping I had done previously was in wooded areas. The landscape had changed quite a bit going through Texas. I was beginning to see the first signs of desert landscape, mainly the introduction of cacti. Along with that came a lack of foliage to hide behind and a wide open landscape. My first night stealth camping in Texas was walking through these oil fields, and my only choice really was just to pitch my tent as far off the side of the road as I could get. This wasn't a pleasant area to sleep in. Due to the oil workers in the area, traffic seemed to continue nonstop throughout the night. I was constantly paranoid about getting unexpectedly woken up, either by police or a worker, making sleeping difficult. This was a big change, and it would take a while to get used to. I didn't want to risk being seen any longer than necessary, so I'd get up around 5 in the morning and continued walking. One positive to this area of Texas was seeing people more than once. Because so many of the drivers on this road were commuters, I had the opportunity to meet a few people who had seen me walking on previous days, as well as run into some of those same people more than once. Scott was one of those people. He works as a supervisor for a few Domino's in the area, so he often made the drive on the highway I was walking on towards Andrews, Texas. Scott pulled over to check on me, and we ended up having a really great conversation. I got to hear about his family, like how he and his daughter stream on Twitch together, most often playing Call of Duty. He also creates TikToks about anything interesting he comes across, and I was no exception. He has to shoot some video of me and have me answer some questions. I was super grateful anytime somebody took the time to post about my journey on their social media. Oftentimes, it would bring new followers to my page that could join in with everybody else following along. The longer I walked, the more the walk became a joint effort. I'm not sure I would have made it without all the support that I was getting, not only from the people I met in person, but from everyone who was following along on social media too.